Welcome back. I am Ashley Banfield, and this is Drop Dead Serious. We just got another massive break in the Lynette and Brian Hooker case. And once again, it is a massive piece of this puzzle.
We have obtained an exclusive photo showing Lynette Hooker on the pool deck of the Abaco Inn at exactly 5:44 p.m. on Easter Eve, April 4th.
Now, why is that so significant? If you are just joining us on this mystery, thank you for being here. Great to have you. Please do not forget to subscribe. For everyone watching, please remember to subscribe and support independent journalism. It keeps us on this case. There is a deep history here. And we have a full playlist to get you caught up on everything that has happened so far. But I cannot review all of it right now at the start of today's episode. I have to explain to everyone watching why this specific photo is so crucial. We know at this point from other photos that we exclusively obtained, which show Brian Hooker leaving the Abaco Inn at 7 p.m. just at sunset. He is caught on camera heading to the docks, where his dinghy was, but Lynette is nowhere in sight. We have no idea where he left her. Did she head down to the docks early and leave him? Or was he walking ahead while she was still inside using the restroom? We just do not know. All we know is that he is seen crossing the road, heading toward the path that leads down to the dinghy dock. He swears he did not get into the dinghy. With Lynette until 7:30 p.m., taking that 12 to 15-minute ride out to their yacht, Soulmate, where everything went completely to hell. Suddenly, 2 to 4 foot seas and powerful 18-knot wind gusts threw her off the back of the dinghy. And it was pitch black, with strong currents and waves swelling so incredibly high. I could not see her. And we got separated, and now it is night, and I have drifted 4 miles over 9 hours to wash up on Marsh Harbor. Now, wait a minute. It only gets dark at 8 p.m. But the critical piece is proving whether Lynette was actually in that boat with Brian. Even if a photograph proved he got into that dinghy with her at 7:30 p.m., even then, it is still highly unlikely. Because you would reach the Soulmate by 7:45 when it is still light outside. I was there at that hour. I can tell you it is still daylight, and it is not truly dark until 8 p.m. It simply does not take 30 minutes to reach Soulmate from the dock. More like 12 to 15 minutes. So why does this photo of Lynette at the Abaco Inn pool at 5:44 p.m. matter? It is not about that specific hour, since we know Brian was already walking to the dock at 7 p.m. And we know that at least Lynette's daughter, Carly, and her boyfriend, Steve, watched security footage of the couple walking at the Abaco Inn around 6:38 p.m. So why is 5:44 key? It is not the time itself that is important. It is the details. When you zoom in on Lynette taking that selfie right there, standing in the wind with the Atlantic Ocean behind her, you can spot a very light patterned band around her left wrist. To me, and to plenty of other observers, that looks exactly like the powder pink Apple Watch she wears all over her social media. Honestly, that signature pink strap stands out so much, it almost mimics a white tan line. Yet there she is, raising her phone to snap selfies. On the left side of the pool, looking out toward the Atlantic. To be precise, that is the north side of the pool. And that distinct pink Apple Watch is clearly visible on her wrist. This detail is crucial. But before we decode why having that watch on right then is so critical, let us shift our focus over to the far right side of the pool deck. Specifically, over on the southern edge. There sits Brian, reclined on a lounge chair, facing the Atlantic, soaking up the sun at 5:44 p.m. Which proves it was still warm enough for sunbathing at 5:45. Trust me, down there you can easily sunbathe until 7 or 7:30. Dusk does not even begin to settle in until around 7:45. Even at that hour, turning on boat running lights is barely necessary. I am talking about the red and green bow lights and the stern white light, the colored navigation lights at the front, and the bright white light at the rear. If I were operating my vessel in those dusky conditions out in the Bahamas,
specifically near Elbow Cay at 7:45, I might not even switch my lights on. Now, because I am an incredibly cautious captain,
I probably would have, but they were not required.
so by 7:45, visibility is clear. You would easily spot a person drifting in the water.
you simply would not lose sight of them.
And believe me, the ocean waves were nowhere near 2 to 4 feet.
Yesterday, I walked you through the clear evidence from the local security cameras,
Located just a quarter-mile north at the Firefly Inn.
That surveillance footage proves the water was dead calm. It was beautiful, with barely a ripple coming out of the bay, not some violent 4-foot swells. There were no howling winds, not even close. In fact, a member of the local search and rescue team visited the precise location where Brian claims Lynette fell off the back of the dinghy.
He checked it this morning. I am recording this on Wednesday, April 22nd.
He made the trip today. The wind speed and direction matched perfectly, allowing him to conduct a highly precise weather recreation.
And his own words were, "I have to take back what I said earlier about it being rough out there. Because once I recreated the exact wind conditions, the water was completely flat." Sheltered by Elbow Cay, even under those identical 18-knot winds, the water was tranquil. There were no 4-foot waves, not even a single foot of swell. It was totally calm. So when Brian claims that sudden 4-foot waves whipped up, that the ocean turned rough and the wind began howling, screaming that they got separated and the currents just swept her away, well, I have already proven that false. But now we have ironclad confirmation from an investigator who initially thought it was rough, only to admit he was completely wrong. It was perfectly calm. And when I ran the retest under the exact same conditions, it was not. Absolutely not. So, if Lynette went overboard with that watch on her wrist, we should still see her physical activity. It simply does not matter where that device ended up. As far as the tech is concerned, Lynette's physical location right now is completely irrelevant. That watch tracked her movements. It knows exactly what she did. And if that device ever managed to drift near Soulmate, both her watch and phone would automatically reconnect to the Starlink internet service on board the yacht. So if you are trying to piece together this timeline, it is highly likely that Brian is not telling the truth. Maybe she never fell overboard. Perhaps they actually returned to their yacht Soulmate, which was just 12 to 15 minutes from the Abaco Inn in calm seas. I am telling you. There might have been some light chop, but the water was quiet. No massive swells, and absolutely nothing that would throw you off the stern. Besides, that boat is stable. We are talking about a rigid hull inflatable tender. It is not some soft, bouncy rubber raft. You would need major waves to be thrown off of that thing. And then to get separated in a wild, sudden storm. It makes no sense. So let us assume they did make it back to Soulmate. It is highly possible. If so, every device on board would instantly connect, right? Her watch was synced directly to her phone. How do I know? Because I spoke with her daughter, who confirmed that her mother's smartwatch was always connected to her phone. She constantly used the Find My app to track it. I do the exact same thing. I constantly misplace my own phone, even when it is right next to me, and use that feature daily. I pinged my phone, and apparently, Lynette did the same. So, her watch was locked onto her phone signal, just like mine. Which means if that watch ever crossed the deck of Soulmate, it would immediately connect to Starlink. Her phone would too, meaning that digital data definitely exists right now. And if Brian had his own devices, they would have reconnected as well. Now, I am not sure about his watch. It is different. It is not an Apple Watch, but rather a specialized Navionics model, which raises 100 questions for me. But if Lynette indeed stepped back on that yacht, there will be proof of it. If she sent an email, if she opened photos or shared an image, if she did anything at all, a record was made. I am deeply curious to see what the eventual forensic data dump will reveal.
We do not know yet, but we will find out.
The truth always comes out.
Now, there is another story about this watch. Just a few months ago, Brian told Lynette's spotter, Carly, that he had purchased a brand new smartwatch for Lynette because her old battery kept dying so quickly. But he did not buy her an Apple Watch. He got her a completely different brand instead, and it did not fit. So she never wore it. Both she and Brian, Lynette and Brian, planned to give it to Carly, who had just visited her mother a couple of months back. But Carly left it behind when she headed back home to Michigan. That watch was green, and remember, it was not an Apple Watch. Here is what we know. When Bahamian authorities seized potential evidence, as they typically do during a standard police investigation, in any active criminal investigation, and searched the yacht called Soulmate, they recovered a watch. They found Lynette's watch, but she may have owned two. There was that green one she intended to pass on to Carly. It was brand new, meant to replace her old Apple Watch, but she was not wearing it. So it likely remained on board the boat. But what about the pink Apple Watch? She wore it in almost every social media photo, including pictures from the Abaco Inn, which happens to be the last place she was seen alive. It really seems she was wearing that pink Apple Watch. We will have to wait and see what that means once all the data is analyzed. I am telling you, that digital footprint catches up with everyone. It trapped Brian Koberger, that idiot. He turned his phone off during the crime. Yet he drove his own vehicle right to the murder scene. I mean, even a brilliant doctorate student studying criminology ruined his own digital trail. So, a guy who apparently did not even know how to install WhatsApp on his phone is clearly no digital genius. He probably did not even realize whether they ever made it back to the boat. It is a fascinating piece of this puzzle. Still, we know Bahamian police recovered one of Lynette's watches. Do they have that new green watch left behind on the boat because Carly forgot to bring it home? Or do they have her old one? The pink Apple Watch she wore right before Brian claims she vanished. Before we move forward, there is one more detail I must share with you. Brian has hired a new defense attorney, a Michigan counsel from Grand Rapids who spoke to ABC, claiming Brian never laid a hand on Lynette. Regardless of what Lynette's mother and daughter claim, she insists Brian never harmed her. But wait until you hear this next part. We have an exclusive interview with one of Lynette's closest childhood friends since high school. And guess what? She paints a very different picture of this relationship, and she brought the photographic evidence. It is a dark, contrasting story. Here is a preview. She claims he was abusive. Remember, these are allegations, not yet proven in court, but police were definitely called out. And there are photographic records of injuries. Lynette confided in her close friend. She even told her mother that Brian had injured her, and she desperately wanted to escape the nightmare on that boat. You will hear that crucial interview in just a moment. But there is another detail in this investigation that really bothers me. Now, Brian's own statements are coming back to haunt him. I actually obtained the text messages he sent to the fire and rescue team. You see, Brian's official alibi is that Lynette somehow fell overboard, claiming she yanked the electric ignition key and lanyard down with her. And the spare key was inside a dry bag she somehow managed to grab. Remember, she was driving with one hand on the tiller, yet supposedly snatched her dry bag, yanked the lanyard, and tumbled out of the boat. I know, I agree. It sounds completely absurd, but that is his story. She allegedly fell off the stern, dragging the safety lanyard along, but there was no wristlet. This was not a safety strap like you wear on a jet ski, which kills the engine if you fall off so you can easily swim back to it. Not in this case. It was just a cord dangling straight down, which means you would have to reach for it while driving. Think about steering with a tiller. You have got your hand right in front of you, navigating forward. Now, he claims she flew out while driving. That means she had to let go of the stable hull, the very thing keeping her steady, to snatch a heavy dry bag she normally kept on the floor. And keep in mind, this is not a wearable backpack. It is more like a long, awkward briefcase. If you carry that, it dangles awkwardly at your hip, bouncing around. It is just incredibly unsafe. Standard practice is to stow the dry bag on the deck, which is exactly how she drove. But to do this, you have to let go of the side, right?
You would have to somehow grab that heavy bag mid-fall.
While your other hand steers the tiller, reach all the way down to yank the lanyard, and then tumble overboard. That is physically impossible. Listen, I have been operating boats for 58 years. That does not happen. I have steered countless tiller boats, and I have nearly thrown myself overboard before. It is impossible. When you hit a massive wave and lose your balance, your natural reflex is to hold on for dear life. You do not reach down for gear on the deck or a tiny cord on the motor. But the biggest mystery remains the dry bag, because it has never been recovered. Absolutely no trace of it has ever turned up. It never even washed ashore anywhere along the Sea of Abaco. Remember, this bag is neon green, which should make it incredibly easy to spot during search operations. You might think the vast ocean swallowed it, but it did not. This is the Sea of Abaco. It is shallow like a swimming pool, only 4 to 8 feet deep at most.
At high tide, it only reaches 15 feet.
You can see the bottom, and they grid-searched everything. The Coast Guard swept the waters and deployed drones overhead. They exhausted every resource, scouring the waves in boats. The bag is not in that water. It has not washed up on any nearby shores. That neon green bag is basically a beacon. Even if it sank, you'd spot it, glowing bright green. But Brian had something incredibly strange to say. A lot of bizarre statements, especially some highly unusual comments about Lynette's dry bag. He was texting back and forth with one of the search and rescue team, because they had recovered the green. I'd call it a pool floaty, because it really wasn't a proper life jacket. He claims he threw it to Lynette. It was just one of those seat cushions they used. You can spot it in their social media posts. He often sat on a blue one, while she used a green one, or sometimes they switched, but you get a clear look at these specific cushions. When that green cushion was found 100 yards south of where his dinghy washed ashore on Marsh Harbor, this was the text exchange. He asked the captain if there was a similar colored dry bag nearby, saying it might be slightly brighter than that seat cushion. It would hold around 10 pounds. I assume it is a typo, but he wrote 10 pounds, meaning a medium-sized bag with a black strap. He asked the responder if the dry bag washed up near that green cushion he claims he threw to her. Except, this man was not actually a captain. Brian was mistaken, assuming this fire and rescue officer was a sea captain. The responder clarified his rank, privately wondering why Brian kept insisting on calling him captain. But figured, since he welcomed him aboard the search and rescue vessel at one point, perhaps Brian just assumed that made him the captain. Regardless, this was the official reply from the rescue representative.
I just recovered the item now.
Brian then replied, and this is critical, wasn't there a subdivision or half a dozen houses back there? What does that mean? We were talking about locating the dry bag. Was the dry bag found near the green cushion? So why bring up a housing subdivision? With only half a dozen homes? It makes no sense. Why would a missing dry bag be located way up in a subdivision of half a dozen houses? It is completely illogical. I have absolutely no clue why he brought that up. It stands out as a red flag, and Lynette's close friends noticed it too.
A few of her friends I have been interviewing,
who are seasoned sailors living aboard full-time. They have been at sea without docking anywhere for over 2 years, living continuously on their sailboat. And they have tracked every single statement Brian Hooker made, carefully mapping out all of his glaring contradictions. And one of those key details
that Blaine Stevenson put together for us
is an actual physical comparison of the gear.
He packed a dry bag with a phone and passports, matching exactly what Brian claimed Lynette carried inside hers.
Her personal phone, 2 passports, and the keys.
The spare key to the dinghy's outboard motor, which, as we know, is really just a tiny, cheap piece of plastic.
You can track down their actual video demonstration on YouTube and TikTok under their channel name Sailing Cameo.
This simple demonstration is highly revealing.
Blaine waited for the perfect wind and wave conditions before rolling up a dry bag, mimicking how Lynette typically did it.
If you look closely at her dinghy,
she simply rolls the top down, leaving a pocket of trapped air inside. Almost nobody squeezes every bit of air out of a dry bag. Leaving some air inside means it will float if it goes overboard. Your gear remains perfectly dry, and you can easily retrieve it from the water. So, he rolls up a bag quite loosely, tosses it straight into the water, and meticulously tracks every single movement.
He records exactly how fast he drifts from his boat and how fast the bag drifts away from him.
It gives us a clear picture
of how things might have played out for Brian Hooker.
Take a look. For the past 2 weeks, I have been flooded with questions about what a dry bag actually is. How does it function? What does it do in the water? So I am just going to show you our standard size,
which is identical to what most boaters use.
All it really is
a waterproof bag
that you roll and clip to seal out the water. For this experiment, I have a portable speaker,
which weighs roughly the same as a GoPro camera.
I have also got a smartphone,
A passport, and a set of keys.
Now, instead of a second passport, since I only own one, I am tossing in our daily logbook to match the weight. You simply hold the top of the bag open
and drop all your items inside.
From there, you just fold the top edge down. Simple enough, right? You roll it down once or twice. Personally, I just do it twice. I know my wife prefers to fold it 3 times, but I am not that strict about it. Then you just buckle the strap like this.
That is your classic dry bag. Notice how I did not blow any extra air inside.
I just let whatever natural air was inside settle around the items in the bag. It feels a bit loose and deflated, which is how most sailors keep them. Sure, some boaters blow them up and roll them down 3 or 4 times until tight. Others are a bit lazier, like me. And for this demonstration, doing it lazily actually replicates the highest risk of failure. Let's look at how it behaves in open water. Give me just a moment to climb down into the dinghy.
Okay, we are on board the dinghy.
There is our main boat. A light wind is blowing from the north. The water current is nearly non-existent at the moment, but it is moving from the north. And we are gently drifting further away from our vessel. Right here is our heavy-duty dry bag. Watch what happens when we toss it right into the water. Now, notice how my small dinghy sits much higher in the water. It catches more breeze. The wind is pushing us faster than the dinghy.
The dry bag, excuse me.
We have more windage, so the dinghy gets pushed hard. The gust is hitting us directly. While we feel the full force of the wind, that dry bag just drifts in place. And I completely trust this gear, since I locked my phone and my passport right inside it. Look back there. You can see our boat. We really haven't traveled very far. There's the floating bag. And here we are now. That is the distance we have covered in just 1 minute. Look at the vessel now. We have drifted this far in only about 2 minutes. Now, at this point, if I wanted to stop this, it would take less than a minute to deploy my anchor and halt our drift. But look at the massive gap growing between my dry bag and the dinghy. Solely due to wind resistance. Maneuvering right next to the bag, grabbing it, tossing it on board, and heading straight back to our main vessel. Now we unseal the bag. Unroll the top. Checking inside, a tiny bit of moisture managed to seep through,
but that is only because I rolled it just twice.
It is slightly damp inside. Everyone kept asking how these waterproof bags actually perform. That is the reality. From now on, will I be folding mine at least 3 times?
Absolutely.
Still, the gear stays completely buoyant even when a tiny bit of moisture slips in.
But it certainly won't drift as fast.
Because the dinghy acts like a sail, anything floating out there is left far behind by the wind.
An incredibly revealing test. A massive thank you to Blaine Stevenson and Sailing Cameo for showing us this.
Before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor. When did you last see a physician? Not just searching your symptoms,
Not trying to tough it out, but visiting a real clinic.
if you are putting off seeing a professional because finding a good specialist who accepts your health insurance and can fit you in quickly is a hassle, I totally get it.
ZocDoc is a free app and website built to help you locate and instantly book in-network physicians.
With over 150,000 professionals across 50 states.
I have used the platform myself for primary care, dermatology, and even dental appointments.
You can search by your specific symptoms and lock in a time within seconds.
Most scheduled visits happen within 24 to 72 hours of booking. So stop delaying your general health checkups and instantly book a highly rated healthcare provider today.
Remember,
Visit ZocDoc.com/Banfield.
this segment is sponsored by ZocDoc. Now let us move on to something else. This next detail is incredible.
By now, you have probably heard the recorded comments that Brian Hooker made, right?
It is a friend's recording of him being asked directly, "Where were you coming from?"
Where were you headed?
And he just rattles off this incredibly long, winding answer.
During his ramble, he casually claims he has no real understanding of local tides or currents, or some weird excuse like that. This is exactly what he said. So, where were you guys coming from and going? Because that is the one detail I could not find in any Facebook
Posts I read, like how they plan to run a grid search.
As for him, well, he claimed he did not understand the local currents.
I just rely on Hopetown. But wait, that story does not square with the message Brian Hooker wrote to the fire and rescue team, does it?
Because to me,
Judging by this text I am about to read, Brian Hooker knew plenty about tides and currents.
listen closely.
He is messaging a search and rescue contact about an area formerly known as Matlows Cay.
Named after an old pirate, the private island was recently bought and is being heavily developed.
They now call it Montage Cay.
It is a beautiful spot, and once construction wraps up, it will be absolutely stunning. I am eager to see it. But here, he suggests that some of the missing items they are hunting for, like his lost gear, the dry bag, or the oar,
Likely drifted straight toward Montage Cay.
believing that even Lynette might have drifted in that direction. He writes that the island is likely deserted for Easter weekend until tomorrow.
It fits with the flood tide up to midnight and the ebb tide.
Afterward, combined with that brutal east wind. So, you actually know all about flood tides and ebb tides at midnight, Brian Hooker?
You understand how they work?
Then why did you tell your friend on that audio tape, when he asked where you were coming from and going to,
That you just did not really understand the local tides and currents? That you were clueless out there?
bullshit?
You knew exactly what a flood tide and an ebb tide meant. You knew.
You flat out lied to him while feeding him. All those details.
Complete verbal diarrhea. Check yesterday's episode to hear how much he babbled.
When it comes to the winds, the waves, and the ocean currents, I did some deep digging and spoke to the absolute best of the best.
I spoke with specialists in drift analysis,
Who use sophisticated tech to track the water based entirely on science, rather than relying on guesswork or visual estimates.
They mapped out the exact drift patterns from the night of April 4th. At 7:30 at night, right when Brian claims she fell overboard into 2 to 4 foot waves and gale force winds.
So here is what I discovered from those marine analysts.
They explained that after mapping the drift patterns and factoring in the exact wind and tide conditions of that fateful night,
There is absolutely no possible way.
If Brian Hooker is actually telling the truth,
And Lynette Hooker went over the side at the exact spot he claims she did.
there's zero chance her body would not drift into the Sea of Abaco, which, remember, is basically like a massive enclosed swimming pool. You would see her.
she would be visible.
Right there on the eastern shores of Elbow Cay by the Tillou Cut, specifically on either the north or south end of those Atlantic beaches.
Even if she drifted through Tillou Cutout into the Atlantic,
The ocean currents would have pushed her back, straight onto the coastline at either the northern or the southern end of that exact passage.
nowhere else.
And if you suspect predators or shark activity played a role, investigators ruled that out too, using the precise word particle. Some trace of Lynette,
Her clothing or physical remains.
something had to surface in the Sea of Abaco or wash up on those northern and southern banks of the Tillou Cut along that eastern Atlantic shoreline. So, there is the hard scientific reality, Brian. Oceanography proves your version of events is impossible. A human body does not just vanish into thin air out there. At least, not in that water. Which points us toward land, an entirely different story.
Was Lynette buried somewhere on the island? That is the real mystery.
Now, in an incredibly dark twist of irony, I want you to look closely at this disturbing text message that Lynette's mother, Darlene, personally shared with me.
This was a message Brian sent her the morning after this whole nightmare happened. Right after the tragedy unfolded.
We are talking the Monday after Easter Sunday.
Just look at the profile photo he used. Honestly, it made me sick to my stomach. His profile picture illustrated a conflict where a husband and wife are screaming and fighting. The punchline was a sailboat. I highly doubt that solved the problem in this case. Now, let's look at the defense attorney that Brian recently hired. And honestly, Brian, you are going to need one, because things look terrible for you.
Good thing you actually got legal counsel.
The attorney goes by the name of Crystal Marie Hauser.
Based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
That makes sense, considering he is originally from Michigan. He claimed he fled the Bahamas to visit his ailing mother in Sacramento. But I highly doubt he is staying with her.
Let us just leave it at that. Reliable sources tell me he has not been staying with his mother.
Now, this lawyer did an on-camera interview with ABC, claiming Brian Hooker would never hurt his wife.
Seriously, do you even know Brian?
Do you know him the way his own mother-in-law does?
Or how Lynette's closest friends know him. Have you actually looked at the text history and the photos?
Here is exactly what she said.
Could Brian ever physically hurt Lynette?
Absolutely not. With so much speculation surrounding Brian Hooker, is there anything specific you want the public to hear? Especially those who believe he is guilty.
I just asked the viewers to treat him how they would want to be treated, and give him the benefit of the doubt.
Are there any plans for him to return to the Bahamas to assist in the search? I am sure his heart is down there, but I cannot confirm if that is actually what he is going to do. People process grief in very different ways. We must stay open-minded, because just because Carly and Darlene are pointing fingers,
There is absolutely zero evidence backing up any of these allegations.
absolutely none.
Now, I am certain Carly and Darlene will not appreciate being dismissed like that.
They are incredibly close to Brian. Darlene is Lynette's mother, and Carly is Lynette's daughter. They are desperate to find out what happened to their loved one. They are mourning, and they are deeply hurting. They have absolutely no clue where she is or what she went through. But so many details of Brian Hooker's story simply do not add up. It sounds like complete garbage, because I have actually been out there. Blaming the waves and wind? Lies. That is the exact frustration Darlene and Carly are dealing with. Hearing stories about things that never happened. The double talk, backpedaling on your own words, claiming you know nothing about tides,
and then suddenly citing an ebb to flood tide shift right after midnight.
These are the painful inconsistencies Carly and Darlene are struggling to process right now, Brian. And your defense attorney, Crystal Marie Hauser.
Ma'am, with respect, I understand you have a job to do, but you really need to look closer at your client and his past.
If you need some direction, I can certainly point you there. Because I reached out to someone who has known Lynette since the 9th grade.
And she stayed in close, regular contact with her.
Lynette would confide in her whenever things went downhill, and they went downhill a lot. Rachel Shaw shared specific details with me, including text messages and photos showing severe bruising. Desperate attempts to escape Brian. Trying to flee the boat and reach the airport, only to change her mind and return to him.
I will let Rachel Shaw describe her own experiences with Lynette.
What Lynette revealed about life on that boat and how things were long before they set sail.
Let me make this clear. These are allegations that have not been proven in a courtroom.
But this is a first-hand account of what a close friend shared over many years. Rachel, tell me about your friendship with Lynette.
Well, I have known Lynette since we were in the 9th grade.
Excuse me. I am sorry, a very long time.
We were close. She was 2 years older than me, graduating 2 years ahead of me.
But we absolutely never lost touch.
She always supported me. I distinctly remember her coming to support me at homecoming when I was a senior on the homecoming court.
She was honestly one of the most supportive friends I have ever had.
Sure. We would go weeks, sometimes months, without talking, but we always stayed close, and I instantly knew when something was off.
We shared a place for almost, I think,
a year and a half, maybe 2 years, back in the early 90s. I stood up in her first wedding, with her first husband. I mean, she was my best friend. She texted me the Wednesday before she went missing. I was actually kind of mad at her. She was like my sister.
I wasn't, furious at her.
I was just a little frustrated with her. Right, because she had not been in touch. No, it was because I knew she needed to come home, basically. I knew she was painting a perfect picture, but something was wrong.
And I knew that from other conversations we had earlier that March.
And I could tell she was incredibly anxious about everything going on in my own life, even though my life is incredibly boring. Extremely boring. She was so worried about my boyfriend, who has a traumatic brain injury. So I take care of him, which gets pretty stressful, and my job in healthcare is also very stressful. I work long hours, and she was really pushing for me to come down there. I am in the process of getting my passport and my real ID.
And she kept telling me that she really wanted me to come down.
You need an escape. You have to take some time off, since you haven't had a real vacation. And I really haven't in a very long time. I was seriously considering it, but I also knew what was really happening.
Right before we had that conversation.
Yeah. Tell me more about that, because you mentioned you knew what was really going on. You were somewhat angry with her. What exactly did you mean by that? To be precise, I believe it was the 12th, because I still have the text I sent right after our call. March 12th? Yes, just this past March. And she was highly distressed over everything that had been happening. She only had a tiny window of time because Brian was out paddleboarding, and she messaged me saying he was paddleboarding. So I knew I had to call her. That was usually how I knew it was time to call. Because she needed to talk right then, since she was finally alone. And I knew she had absolutely no privacy there. So she couldn't just call me normally. She couldn't simply hop in the car, drive to the store, and dial my number.
So anyway, she got through to me and started explaining some of the things that had been going on.
I believe they were down in Florida. It all started because their grandson had told them something in confidence. Brian wanted to respect that trust and keep it quiet. But Lynette insisted the boy's mother needed to know. So she went ahead and told her, causing a massive blowout. I remember half listening to all of this while trying to work. I was completely thrown off. What are you even saying? She admitted they had started drinking again lately, and I immediately thought, oh no.
I told her that was a hard line. She agreed, claiming they were quitting again.
We simply cannot drink. We just cannot go there. She knew. Things spiral fast when they drink. I replied that at this point, promises did not really matter anymore.
Regardless, she kept repeating how bad things were, begging me for some real advice.
I asked her, "What exactly do you want me to say?" And she whispered, "I am only 10 minutes from the airport." I told her, "Get on that plane." Shortly after, she was rushing toward the terminal and dialed my number again. She was actually calling from inside the airport terminal. At least, that is what she claimed. We had always been honest.
Honestly, where their boat was anchored, she only had to reach the main dock.
From there, it was a quick 10 to 15-minute taxi ride to the terminal.
Yes, and I knew that geography too. But the timeline of those distances did not hit me until later.
Only after everything unfolded.
At the time, my only advice was simply to get on that flight. Board the plane. If the situation is that toxic, just leave. If the old patterns are coming back, you have to run. But she did not listen. The very next day, she sent a photo of her plate, texting that he had cooked.
I was so angry that I ignored her, thinking to myself,
if things slide back to how bad they were 2 years ago, you will deeply regret this. Tragically, those warning signs and photos are exactly what I forwarded to you.
Can you describe what occurred 2 years ago? Walk me through it.
You said things turned ugly, but I need to understand what she actually confessed. What exactly did she mean by bad? What was her dynamic with Brian like during those moments of confidence? What kind of dark secrets was she sharing with you? Pure violence. Well, 2 years ago, they had a massive drunken argument, and he ended up choking her. He had her pinned desperately against the cabin seat. The force of it left deep bruises all over her back. She called me the very next morning. I can still picture her calling from that boat. She was still trapped on that boat, and she was deeply shaken. She said he literally told her he wished he had finished the job and thrown her overboard. She said nobody would ever find her. Was that in a text message, or did she actually call you? She called me directly. She never put that in a text. She rarely ever texted about these things because she was so incredibly private. And looking back, keeping everything so quiet really ended up hurting her. Whenever she was finally on the verge of walking away, she would tell me, "I am just so embarrassed."
I believe that is exactly why she kept everything hidden, because she felt so
humiliated by the thought that she had somehow failed. It was so embarrassing. Did she ever call you to talk about other incidents? Or describe other violent encounters?
Yes, like the time she actually ended up going to jail.
She called me right after that.
She told me all about what happened and said she was just defending herself. I recall the fight was over a locked door.
Something involving her daughter and his. Older son and a locked door, and things escalated from there. Unfortunately, I do not recall the exact details. That was just a phone call. But she called me about another incident too. Well, just to clarify that last incident, she was arrested because he had a bloody nose. The version of events I have heard from various sources is that she was arrested because he had blood on his nose. But she had injuries that showed up later, so the prosecutors never filed charges or pursued any case against her. Yeah, they dropped everything. It was a liquor-fueled fight, and she kept saying it was just the alcohol. She used to tell me that. And as far as I knew, they were completely sober, especially during the month of March, because she told me that as long as they stayed sober, they were fine. What was that next incident you were starting to mention before I cut in? My apologies. The one she personally told you about. She had mentioned something about him having a major clash with his oldest daughter, Jessica. Something was going on, and I really don't recall what the argument was actually about. I just recall him having to go to court constantly for it. And she was incredibly stressed about it back then. You know, she supported him and kept most of it hidden, so I never really learned about it.
Like the actual physical abuse that
Nothing actually happened until he did it, just 2 years ago.
So when exactly? Because that was a long time ago.
This was the specific incident that actually went before a jury. The jury acquitted him, but there was an accusation that he choked his 12-year-old daughter, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So she kept it hidden and you only found out a couple of years ago?
Right. When it happened, she called me during the court proceedings back in 2015. But I do not recall her actually telling me if it was real abuse back then or not, honestly. But I definitely remember her talking about it after he actually did it to her. Right after he choked her.
Can you tell me more about those tense incidents on the sailboat?
Because you mentioned off camera that she would usually send you a text.
Are you up?
And that was usually code for, I need to talk on the phone.
What kind of details about those boat incidents did she actually share with you?
Just the heavy drinking and fighting. She said it would get vicious and he would become incredibly mean.
Physical?
Yeah, she would actually take the blame. She would say, well, I always poke the bear. I push the arguments. I fight back. That is what she told me. And I told her, I think your absolute best way to fight back
Would be to just leave. But did she ever mention him getting physically abusive with her on that boat?
Yes, she did. What exactly did she say?
She definitely told me about the choking and how they would throw things at one another. Things like that. I mean, the only detail that stands out clearly in my mind is the choking. Just that. Can you describe what she told you about it?
She said he choked her so hard she thought she was going to pass out.
Get away from there. You are going to chew through that wire.
I think she said, he choked me to the point where I felt like I was about to pass out, and then he let go.
And the very next day, he told her, I wish I had finished the job and thrown you overboard.
And I said, you need to leave right this second.
She packed up and stayed at her mom's place for about 2 or 2.5 months.
During that period, she was looking for work, but he kept trying to win her back.
I actually have a text message that he sent to her back then.
I would need to search for it, but I can definitely find it. She had sent me a screenshot of a message he sent to her when they broke up about Rosie wanting to see her.
And she explicitly asked him to.
She clarified, his daughter Rosie.
He kept saying, my daughter Rosie still wants to see you.
You know, even after everything, she still wants to talk, to stay close. She truly loves you.
It was a massive text message, and at the end she wrote, I love Rosie so much too.
But to me, this feels like pure manipulation. It has to stop.
He kept doing this the entire time she stayed with her mom. He would constantly beg her to come down, to go on a date with him.
And basically love bomb her. Did she tell you this in person, or did she text it?
She told me directly, but I still have that one text message.
Was that when she took photos of the bruises on her back?
And told you, I am taking these photos so I do not forget?
She sent them over, and I was just stunned. But I never delete anything. I kept them all.
I still have every single one. That text is right here on my phone. I knew I saved it, and honestly, at the time, I thought, good.
I am so relieved you are finally finished with him.
But unfortunately, she went back. I was down in Florida, and we met up for dinner. I still have a photo of us posted on my Facebook.
Just the two of us. That was the final time we were together in person, and it was the very day before she went back to him after that fight. We went to this restaurant. I think it was called, let me think, Catfish Johnny's down in Florida. We sat and had dinner. I was in town for a work trip, and she was staying with her mother.
Her mother lives only about 20 minutes from where I work when I am down there.
And that is when she admitted she was going back to him. And she asked me, what do you think?
And I told her, Lana, if anything ever happens and you can no longer speak for yourself,
or if you go missing,
or if you vanish,
I am going to blame Brian. I am pointing the finger at him. I do not think you should ever return. But if this is what makes you happy, I will stand by your choice to try one more time.
And, honestly, I am certain there were other incidents we never heard about because she kept things so incredibly private.
I knew that firsthand from living with her. She was always extremely guarded. She barely confided in anyone, and I never breathed a word because she trusted me completely. I mean, her mother and I would talk from time to time, but I even hid a lot of things from her mom. Lana was my friend, and I did not want her mother carrying that heavy burden. Yet the very second her mom called to tell me the news, my mind instantly flashed back to what happened 2 years ago.
And when I shared that with her,
The following day, I called her from Michigan. That previous evening had been my last night in Florida.
I had just flown home,
And my own boyfriend had a horrific accident right around the time I arrived back.
while we were speaking on the phone, she suddenly said to me,
oh, by the way,
I told Brian you said you would point the finger at him if anything happens to me.
and he actually replied, "She told you that is fair."
He literally said, "That is fair."
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And to be clear, you told Lynette, if you suddenly vanish or something terrible happens, I am pointing the finger straight at Brian. Or if you ever end up in a position where you cannot speak for yourself, I am going to blame your husband, Brian.
She repeated my warning to him, and he just replied, "That is fair."
I will never forget that response. It sent a cold chill right down my spine. That conversation happened 2 years ago, and it still haunts me today. What do you think about the defense attorney Brian just hired? Up in Michigan, who claims he never abused Lynette. I have actual proof. I have the photo evidence, and I handed everything over to the United States Coast Guard, too. So, yes, I know the truth. I know he strangled her once until she was right on the verge of blacking out, which, in my book, is attempted murder.
Regarding those moments of domestic abuse,
You have detailed the specific incident where he allegedly choked her until she was on the verge of passing out, leaving deep bruises on her back that she caught on camera. Were there any other attacks? Did she describe any other incidents of violence to you, either in text messages or over the phone? No, nothing else that she detailed in texts or phone calls. But this past March, she admitted to me that things were getting really bad. She said she was 10 minutes from the airport, so I told her, get on the plane. If the situation is as terrifying as you say, if it is what I think, just get on that flight. And that was where our conversation cut off, because I was at work and had to hang up. I could not stay on the line. And she actually bought a ticket for March 11th, right? Yes, that is what they said. I had no idea about the flight until after her disappearance. But it proved to me that she was hiding a dark secret from all of us, keeping her private struggle completely locked away. And you mentioned, if she was running, something terrible must have been happening. Sorry, what was that? You were in the middle of saying you fully expected. Could you finish that thought? I expected her to call and say she made it to Miami, or was safe with her mom, or even alone at her house here in Michigan the following day. I truly believed that. So when I learned she actually returned, it just baffled me. Why? It was an intuitive feeling. I did not immediately ring her phone to scream at her or ask what on earth she was doing. But I knew deep down there was a lot more to the story. I could just feel it, though I realized my words would not change her mind. Because she was absolutely convinced their marriage would work out, as long as they both stayed sober. And that was the exact story she kept repeating all month long. We spoke quite a bit more as March wound down. It was rarely over text. We preferred actually calling each other. Hearing each other's voices just felt better. She assured me they had both stayed sober, no alcohol, and they had even quit smoking marijuana. And honestly, she sounded really relieved about it. She loved it. But then, when the devastating news finally broke, and I heard they were drinking again, I was completely stunned. Wait, she literally just told me, only 2 or 3 weeks back, that they had completely cleaned up their act. It makes zero sense. But looking back, I genuinely believe she thought that as long as they stayed away from alcohol and stayed entirely sober, that every single problem between them would just vanish.
Rachel, I am incredibly sorry about what happened to your friend and for the pain your family is enduring right now.
Part of me wishes she had sent texts instead of calling. Sometimes I talk to her, wherever she is now, and tell her I want to shake her for not leaving me more clues to pass on. Because, honestly, my memory of those specific details is starting to fade.
Hey, do not blame yourself. I just really appreciate you opening up to me.
She kept asking, why did they start drinking again? It is just heavy.
I am deeply sorry for what you are all enduring, and I want to thank you for bravely sharing these memories with us.
Of course.
Our gratitude to Rachel Schaff for sitting down with us. That was an incredibly difficult conversation.
She is talking about a beloved friend who, by now, she is likely coming to terms with the harsh reality of never seeing her again, and realizing there was absolutely nothing she could have done to stop it.
She did her best.
Remember, these are only allegations.
They have not been proven in court. This is simply one person sharing what her friend Lynette confided in her over time,
Backed up by photographic evidence she shared. So we have to weigh that carefully.
But let me emphasize this. If you are watching this and find it triggering, or if you or someone you know is currently surviving relationship abuse, we want to share a critical resource with you. That number is 1-800-799-SAFE.
You can also text the word BEGIN, BEGIN, to 88788.
And there is one more detail to share. We know many viewers with connections to the Bahamas, specifically Elbow Cay, might be tuning in to this broadcast. Sending you all my best. If you believe you captured any photos on the evening of April 4th, the night right before Easter Sunday,
Or if you were visiting the Abaco Inn and recorded some video footage,
maybe snapping some pictures of that beautiful sunset, or people laughing inside the bar, even boats moving in and out of the harbor, please check your files.
if you snapped photos looking over White Sound Channel toward the Abaco Inn, remember the sunset points right over that water.
The waves crash out past the pool, facing the Atlantic.
Stunning, beautiful photos.
If you captured any images or footage, please send them to our email, dropdeadseriousinfo@gmail.com. Write to dropdeadseriousinfo@gmail.com. If you hesitate to share them with me directly, I completely understand. But please, I beg you, send that evidence to the United States Coast Guard Investigative Services. These investigators are working day and night on this case. They are the federal government's heavy hitters leading this investigation, and they have established multiple secure ways for you to submit tips anonymously. You can visit their official portal at p3tips.com. To be clear, that is the letter P, the number 3, tips.com. Leave a confidential tip there, or simply download their dedicated smartphone application. They built a secure application designed for secret reporting called CGIS Tips. Just search your app store for CGIS Tips and download it today. The option for safe private reporting is right on screen. Get everything you have to the Coast Guard. We are displaying a QR code right here. They desperately need your visual evidence. We need those cell phone photos and videos from the Abaco Inn that evening.
If you spent time down at Tahiti Beach earlier that day, that helps too.
If you took snapshots of Brian and Lynette Hooker, or if you know people who visited Elbow Cay, contact them and ask if they hung out at the Abaco Inn that Saturday night.
Did they take any pictures?
They might be hard to spot. Usually, you are focusing on a subject up front, while Brian and Lynette are lingering way in the background. You need to zoom in.
So please, scour your camera rolls, review your videos, and send whatever you find.
Once more, that email address is dropdeadseriousinfo@gmail.com.
And if you hold any inside knowledge about this investigation, drop us a line.
reach out directly to us at dropdeadseriousinfo@gmail.com.
And I want to sincerely thank the many viewers who have already stepped up and shared crucial information.
We truly appreciate it. Let us keep pushing forward. We need justice for Lynette Hooker.
We are not letting this drop. This mystery will not simply fade into the background. We are going to uncover the truth.
Even if it takes us the entire year, we will establish what actually happened to Lynette Hooker and find out if Brian is lying to us.
This goes out to you, Brian Hooker's defense attorney.
The facts might reveal that he has physically harmed Lynette in the past, and that history repeated itself on that fateful night.
I understand. Your job is to make sure everyone presumes his innocence, and we are trying to respect that. But every single time I uncover a detail that makes absolutely no sense and contradicts the story, staying objective gets harder and harder.
That is exactly how investigators establish probable cause and assemble a criminal case.
So, you go do your job. For the rest of you, thank you so much for watching and listening.
Make sure to subscribe to the channel. It really keeps us going.
I appreciate everyone who has joined our community membership. There is a join button right below this video. Members get access to exclusive content, which I am incredibly excited to share.
I will be hosting a question and answer session soon, and I am genuinely grateful you tuned in today.
Always remember, the truth is not just serious, it is drop-dead serious.